INFJs are the most rare type, especially in men. I think it's the most rare type for a guy to be. They're an amazing type, incredibly perceptive. I'm an INTJ, and so I feel like we're on the same wavelength. To have conversations, to be with another dominant NI user is so rare. I never get that experience. So to be able to have conversations that feel like myself, I appreciate that so much because I never get to have that. I think INJs understand what it's like to feel misunderstood. Even if you put a lot of yourself out there, most people are not interested in talking about the same type of things. And so those types of conversations get shut down. So even if you put yourself out there a lot, the messaging is still, we don't want to talk about that. I can understand the feeling of just like being misunderstood, not getting to talk about what you want to talk about. And so when I talk with INFJs, I am so appreciative and I enjoy it so much. They're also just so kind. They're like similar flavor, but different flavor from me. So before I really get into this, I notice a lot of mistypes with INFJs. I notice the most mistypes with INFJs than I notice any other types. There are a couple common ones. INFJ and INFP is a very common mistype. INFJ and ISFJ is a very common mistype. I will end up doing videos comparing those, but I'll try to just do it like in one. Let's see if I can do it like in one sentence just for the purpose of this video. The difference between an INFJ and an INFP, the INFP is oriented on their own feelings. The INFJ is oriented on the group's feelings. If you're not sure which one of those you are, you're probably an INFP. If you're oriented on the group's feelings, you know you're oriented on the group's feelings. I've never met an FJ that was like, I'm not sure if I'm oriented on the group's feelings. Like, they know what it's like to feel other people's emotions and to constantly be feeling like they have to manage the group's emotions and take people's plate and have a warm, inviting home and take care of people. The INFJ and the INFJ is going to enjoy zoning out a lot of time. That's going to be like who they feel like they are. The NI process is very zoning out, thinking about trends. ISFJs have introverted sensing. That's a lot more thinking about fond memories and having pictures. I know a lot of ISFJs have a lot of pictures around the house. I think ISFJs are a lot more crafty, like into crafts. They're going to pay attention to like if they, if they're thirsty or if they need to eat, regular things like that. The INFJ is going to be really forgetful of their body by default. I'm an INTJ, so I have that same sort of issue. And so sometimes like I'll have kidney pain and that's how I know I'm dehydrated because I don't pay attention to the cues prior to that. ISFJs probably have more issues with trying new things and not liking change. INFJs are going to be a lot more positively inclined toward the future. ISFJs are a lot more positively inclined toward the past and anxious about the future. Anyways, that's very brief. I need to do like more in-depth videos, but a lot of times the tests are wrong and the tests are reliably wrong. So maybe you've taken the test 80 times and you've always got the same result. The tests are reliably wrong. So I've noticed by like one letter. So if you think you're an INFJ, you may want to look into the ENFJ, the ISFJ, the INTJ, and the INFP. So if you're like fresh off the test, basically like the 16 Personalities website, Myers-Briggs, that all originally came from Carl Jung. In the early 1900s, he coined what are called cognitive functions. And so there are 8 cognitive functions. It's kind of like what you're tuned into, how your brain functions, how you make decisions. And they've since, now like in recent years, they've hooked different personality types up to the EEG machine, and they find that certain personalities use different regions of the brain more often than other regions of the brain, which kind of makes sense. And they kind of correspond to these cognitive functions. So Myers-Briggs came along later, and they said, okay, well, if you use this region and this region of the brain, we call you the INFJ. If you use this function and this function, we call you the ENTP. ENTP, INFJ, that's just meant to be like a code. It wasn't meant to be like introvert versus extrovert, introvert versus sensing. It's just like a code, but that's kind of been lost. So now all people really know are like the 4-letter dichotomies. So I'll kind of like explain how the code works. So the middle 2 letters are the 2 most important letters, or like the meat of this thing. Everyone's second letter is called their perceiving letter. It's how you take in information, how you organize information. It's what things you're kind of interested in. Some people are interested in the sights and the sounds. Some people are interested in the trends and the patterns. Some people key in on different things. And so for you, that's intuition. It's kind of the patterns, the trends going on, how things are going in the future. Everyone's third letter is considered their judging letter. It's how you make judgments. It's how you make decisions, how you think things should be. Basically, how do you decide this decision's better than this decision? And for INFJs, it's based on the feelings of the group, taking into account everyone's needs, and the best decision is the one that really meets everyone's needs. So if you're a J, what that means is you extrovert your judging letter. So for you, that's F. So you're oriented on the external feelings, or extroverted feelings of the group. You may be, in fact, forgetful of your inner feelings because you're focused on the external feelings. And then that just automatically means you introvert your perceiving letter. So the inner intuitions. You're kind of organizing and distilling down to clarity the patterns on the inside and the trends and where things are going. And then since you're an introvert, that means you dominantly prioritize the introverted one and you secondarily prioritize the extroverted one. So that means your first function is introverted intuition. It's abbreviated NI. And your second function is extroverted feeling, abbreviated FE. But out of those 8 cognitive functions that Carl Jung coined, everyone dominantly uses 4. And they're kind of like a yin-yang. They're kind of like 4 yin-yangs that come together to make 8 functions. So the way you figure out your third function is the direct opposite of your second function. So since your second function is extroverted feeling, the opposite of extroverted is introverted, the opposite of feeling is thinking, so introverted thinking is your third function. And extroverted feeling and introverted thinking are like that yin-yang. They're 2 complete opposites from each other, but together they complement each other and create a complete picture. And the way you find your fourth function is the direct opposite of your first function. Since your first function is introverted intuition, the opposite of introvert is extroverted, the opposite of intuition is sensing, so extroverted sensing is your fourth function. And like I said with the second and third function, same with the first and fourth. They are complete opposites of each other, like yin and yang, 2 opposite forces that are a polarity that come together to kind of complement each other. That's kind of a lot. So I do have a Myers-Briggs playlist if you want to check that out, and it goes from like easiest to most complex as you go. It kind of goes chronologically. So if you are interested in like more definitions, within that playlist I have a video that's like, what are the 8 cognitive functions and what are the 4 types of introverts and the 4 types of extroverts. And in those videos it goes into more definitions, like more deep definitions of the cognitive functions, which I will get into in this video, but kind of in like a skimming sort of way. It's not really the holistic system. So everyone's first function is kind of their dominant strength, and it's the function that they use in the most contexts of their life. So you're using it 98% of the time. You're using it in your finances, in your marriage, with your kids, with your pets, at work, all contexts of your life. And for INFJs, that's introverted intuition. Intuition in general is all about patterns. Some personalities have extroverted intuition, some personalities have introverted intuition like you do. And introverted functions distill down to more clarity, and extroverted functions kind of expand and look at possibilities. Introverted intuition is kind of distilling down, and when it's looking at patterns, it's saying what is the most likely pattern. It's not saying what are all the options of all the patterns. It's not really exploring patterns. It's kind of distilling down and saying what is going to happen. What is my vision for the future? What is my life purpose? How's this person's life going to go? How's my life going to go? And it's kind of organizing the patterns like that. And it's not giving really the options for how your life could go, but it's saying, how do I want it to go? And I'm going to make sure everything I do is targeting that. And so it's really analyzing trends. It gets meta on things. Like, it would be more fun for an INFJ, like, instead of saying Sally's going to college this year, a more fun topic is to say, what is the trend of college admissions like? Is college on the uphill or is college on the decline? Like, what is the trend for how it's going? Are less and less people going to college? Are more and more people going to college? And that's what intuition is about. It's about trends and patterns. And INFJs could like to talk about people because of extroverted thinking, but the more specifics are in a conversation, the more stories that are in a conversation, that's more of like an S type of conversation. So if you're an ISFJ, you would like stories way more than an INFJ would like stories as far as this first function goes. Because introverted intuition is kind of detached from individual specifics. It's taking big trends of things. So the INFJ's second cognitive function is extroverted feeling, and everyone's second cognitive function is not really as fun to go to because, like, if you're an introvert, this one's extroverted. If you were an extrovert, this one would be introverted. And you really need this function because, like, you're an INFJ, you need this feeling function part of you. What people tend to do is they tend to skip over their second function because it's too extroverted, they don't want to go there, it's too uncomfortable. But in my opinion, introversion and extroversion are both needs, like food and water are both needs. You might have a preference for food, like maybe you like food more than you like water, but you need them both. It's kind of the same way with introversion and extroversion. Maybe you enjoy introversion more, you get more energy from introversion. That's where you feel most like yourself because that has to do with your first function. But in my opinion, to get the most fulfillment and the most enjoyment out of life is to get into that second function. It is out of your comfort zone, it is stretching, but it's really where you can grow. And the reason you need them both is because introversion and extroversion give you two different things. Introverted functions kind of distill down. They make you like turn inward. And when you turn inward and distill down to the wisdom and clarity, you get depth, you get wisdom. But then what use is that wisdom if you don't then turn outward and do something with it? And you turn out to people and you have an impact on people. And when you look back on your life, you can say you had a fulfilling life because you stretched yourself and you took the wisdom that you have and you helped other people with it. You need both the input and the output. And what extroverts tend to do is they tend to have way too much output. They tend to run themselves ragged. They tend to be way too busy. They might have a bunch of shallow interactions, like a lot of a lot of quantity interactions. What introverts tend to do is they might tend to be slothful. They spend too much time on the computer researching, too much time on Netflix, and they kind of lose impact. Honestly, sometimes the introverts, when they're introverting, it's not even quality introverting time. Like some quality introverting time would be some time that gives you the wisdom and the clarity. But if you're just, binging watching Netflix, that's not going to give you as much wisdom and clarity as some other introverted activities could give you. So extroverted feeling is all about the extroverted, so the external feelings, the feelings of the group. And it's kind of wanting to, you're kind of paying attention to the group's emotions and how everyone's feeling. And because you're so oriented on how everyone's feeling and you want to make sure that everyone is feeling good and kind of harmonious, that leads FJs, all people who have extroverted feeling, to take some certain actions. They usually have warm, inviting homes that are kind of cozy. They usually speak with a very kind tone of voice, especially if they developed extroverted feeling. Maybe if an INFJ is too much in their third function, which we'll talk about, maybe that wouldn't be so much there. But I've noticed FJs in general, they talk with a, let me see if I can mimic them, like, hi, how are you doing? And they just, I can't, it's so weird for me to put on that tone of voice, but they just speak in a really kind way, and they just look in your eyes, and they really make everyone feel seen and heard. And it's kind of like a selfless function. They're really taking care of other people's needs. So in a good way, this function, if INFJs can get into this function more, this makes them initiating. Sometimes I notice INFJs can be a little bit on the defensive instead of on the offensive with extroverted thinking. So instead of really controlling the vibe of the room and making sure it's a good vibe, sometimes they're just sitting back and they're like, oh, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to do the wrong thing. So it causes them to get more in their shell because they're just so conscious of everyone's feelings. They just don't want to say the wrong thing. But if you get more into this function, you can get a little bit more on the offensive and just kind of initiate the events, plan the event. You can have more say in things. Try to use extroverted feeling in all contexts of your life. So in your finances, how can you get everyone's needs met and take control and initiate? With your kids, with your pets, at work, at church, in any context you find yourself in. You say how can I be more extroverted? How can I be more initiating? How can I pay more attention to people's needs in a full, well-rounded way? Everyone's needs. That would be everyone's needs, including yourself. How can you integrate that in all areas of your life? So everyone's third function, this is kind of the sore spot for people, especially if they're in their teens and 20s. I find that especially people in their teens and 20s really have issues with their third function. And it's because it's also introverted. So when you're younger and you tend to be not as mature and kind of unhealthy, you're very introverted. So in your first function and in your third function, you just kind of skip over that. So instead of seeming like an INFJ, you could seem a little bit like a T because it's this introverted thinking. It's your inner thoughts, your inner logic. I've seen INFJs be really into spreadsheets kind of randomly because it's kind of this inner logic. I have seen an INFJ whose tone of voice seems a little bit more like a thinker. This is kind of the reason why some people ask the question, can an INFJ turn into an INTJ or an INTJ turn into an INFJ? And it's because your second and third functions are kind of balanced. They're always kind of fighting for which one you're going to use more often than the other one. And honestly, when you're younger, you might use your third function more than your second function. So I think that's why some people think maybe you can turn into one or the other. You can't really. In certain times of your life, you might use these functions more often than other functions, but you don't turn into a different personality. It just means you're pulling on a different function within your personality. Everyone's second and third function, it's kind of like a light switch that's constantly being flipped on and off. It's am I going to do the better thing, go to my second function, like the angel on my shoulder, or am I going to flip the light switch down to my third function and have kind of the devil on my shoulder? It's always a mix of the two. And it's if I'm in my second function, am I going to do it in a watered down way that maybe it's not the fullest extent of what it could be? I feel kind of bad for the INFJs that have this function and this function in this spot. I feel kind of bad. One thing that I notice that happens with FJs in general is they'll be an extroverted feeling, 98% of the time, they're taking care of other people. But when they're in extroverted feeling, they're not using it to its fullest potential. So they're taking care of other people's needs, but they're not taking care of their own needs. And this goes on, this goes on, this goes on, and they might not be around other extroverted feelers. So there aren't other people around thinking of their needs. So they're the only one in the house taking care of everyone's needs. And then all of a sudden, they have just had it. They've avoided conflict for a couple weeks. They've taken care of everyone's needs. They avoided conflict. They didn't take care of their own needs. And then all of a sudden, bam, the light switch is flipped down. And all of a sudden, we are in introverted thinking. And it is icy. And it's I'm going to tell the full truth. I don't care about your feelings. No one cared about my feelings for the last 2 weeks. So I'm just going to tell it like it is. And I am not going to back down. And it is icy. Everyone's third function is like where they go in conflict, and when you use introverted thinking in conflict, all of a sudden it's like, I am going to tell you like it is. I'm holding nothing back. There is no harmony in the room. It is all just, I'm going to be completely just like icy. It's honestly like this self-sacrificing light switch. Is kind of what I would call it. Self-sacrificing, and then we're only talking about what I want and how you have not treated me correctly. I think part of why this cycle happens is because they're kind of like conflict averse. Extroverted feeling like really doesn't enjoy conflict. It wants there to be harmony. So what happens is you'll avoid conflict, put up with bad behavior, because you get kind of like introverted. You're like, nah, I guess I won't say anything. And what you're doing right there is you're putting off extroverted feeling. Let's say someone does something that hurts your feelings. And you could, in that moment, get a little extroverted and tell them how you're feeling, and that would create true harmony. A little bit of conflict would create true harmony because you would be feeling harmonious. But instead, sometimes what INFJs will do is they kind of forget themselves in that piece. So they kind of go on, like, oh, I won't say anything. So they kind of get too introverted. They kind of avoid it. They don't say the truth. So it's kind of this shallow extroverted feeling because they're neglecting themselves. And then all of a sudden, they're like, you know what? Full introverted thinking. We're going icy on you. I think part of it is because I think INFJs are kind of sensitive to criticism. And so I think that they think other people are also going to be as sensitive to criticism. And I think the reason that INFJs are so sensitive to criticism is because they're pretty critical of themselves. Introverted thinking is saying, it's always cleaning out its own beliefs. It's like, oh, this belief is not true, cutting it out. This belief's not true, cutting it out. And it's making sure that you're logical and true and precise with your language. But sometimes if like it's in a third spot, it's criticizing things that are not depersonalized. It's not just like bad thought, gone. It's like, you did this wrong, and you did this wrong, and you did this wrong. And it's very critical. So if you spend a lot of time in your introverted thinking criticizing yourself, then as soon as another person criticizes you, it's like that was a sensitive, sore spot because you've already been like scraping it yourself. So for someone to just do a little poke at it, it's like really a problem. So you got to think about like, how can you show extroverted feeling? How can you extend that to yourself in your thought life? Like, how can you create harmony in your thought life? And I think sometimes with this extroverted feeling, introverted thinking switch, what can happen is you meet someone and extroverted feeling says, oh, this person's having a rough time. We need to take them in. Maybe we should talk to them, kind of nurse them back to health, bring them under our wing. And, extroverted feeling really cares about people. And then it's kind of that self-deferring. It's deferring that extroverted feeling again. It's like you notice a red flag and it's like, oh, well, I guess we just gotta like keep the peace. I mean, that kind of hurt my feelings and that creates kind of some inner but we gotta, and other people are saying things, but we gotta just keep on going. I don't want to cut this person out of my life. And this goes on and goes on and goes on and goes on and goes on. It'll go on for 8 months. You have this relationship and now you're really invested in the relationship as a really close person. And then you didn't listen to the advice of any of the people that said this was a bad person. And then this person, finally the last straw comes. It's this straw that broke the camel's back. It's kind of like a common thing I notice with FJs. The straw that broke the camel's back. And then all of a sudden it's like door slam. It's like, you know what? You are out of my life. This is terrible. The relationship is blowing up. I noticed surprisingly that with FJs, a lot of their relationships end with blow-ups. Like some other people might just kind of like gradually fade out of their life. That's one tactic that some people do. But with unhealthy FJs, it's like a door slam. It's a blow-up. We were best friends, potentially a codependent relationship. This is like with unhealthy INFJs. And then you are gone. We're getting into introverted thinking and we are cutting you out. I've heard a lot of INFJs saying that they get like taken advantage of. And you just gotta think, if you repeatedly get in relationships with narcissists, it's you. I mean, that's just like a hard thing. Every personality type has an issue. They have this repeated pattern. They're like, oh, it's so hard to be my personality type because this keeps happening to me. And it's like, well, if this keeps happening to you, it's you. I mean, that's with every personality type. It's not just an INFJ thing, but everyone's got their own patterns that they gotta get rid of. For INFJs, it's like you gotta get rid of bad people sooner than you have done in the past. Let's say within a week you notice a red flag, it wouldn't be that hard. You can just kind of fade, you can just kind of fade out of your life. You drift apart. You don't hang out that much. You don't put all your energy into them. You got to put your energy into people that are better than you. Your 5 best friends got to be people you want to be like and you want to emulate and you look up to. If you spend all your time hanging out with these people that you got to nurse back to health, that's just automatically going to create some FE issues where you're going to feel lacking. So you got to take care of your own needs, be initiating, be a little more extroverted, have the difficult conversations. One thing that I think INFJs can feel is very misunderstood, and I understand a piece of that. Being an INTJ, I understand that no one wants to talk about INJ things, it seems like. No one wants to talk about the trends and things. And I think that can cause INFJs to hold part of themselves back. to have one-sided relationships where they feel like they deeply understand everyone in their life, but no one understands them. That can be the problem with introverted thinking. It gets kind of into the intricacies of this is how I'm so different from everyone else, and you gotta get into extroverted feeling. Join the group. Be part of the group. I promise there are people out there that understand you. At least from an introvert intuition perspective, it's like I've found people that get me. It is incredibly rare, but if you stay in your house 24/7, it's incredibly rare that you're going to find people that understand you. Like, odds are you're going to have to hang out with 99 people that don't get you so that you can find one person that gets you. And that's just how it has to be. And that's so unfortunate, but you can do it. And the more you get into extrovert feeling, the more you extrovert, the more odds there are of you coming into contact with someone that like will get you. And I think what this loop, a loop is when you're in your first and third function. This loop of introverted intuition and introverted thinking can make, I think this pattern of like INFJs idealizing people, and I is like, this is how it could be. And introverted thinking kind of, it perfects its beliefs, and it sees, so they basically see like this perfect person. This is also partly with like some watered down extroverted feeling. Extroverted feeling sees the good in everyone. And so you see the good in this person, and then they crash your hopes. And I think if you get into extroverted feeling fully, extroverted feeling knows what people are about. You can look at someone and tell the mood they're in. You can just feel the vibe off people. You can look at someone and know if they're in a healthy state or an unhealthy state. That's just an INFJ's gift. And so try not to idealize people. At the very beginning, this is what you say to yourself. This person is not as good as I think they are, and they're not as bad as I think they are. Like, I just heard about, there's this book, How We Love. Actually, I think INFJs would probably enjoy that book. Maybe you should read the book, How We Love. It's kind of like conflict styles. Different people deal with conflicts in different ways. It's kind of like attachment styles, but in my opinion, it's a little better. What vacillators do, and I think INFJs exhibit a lot of this behavior, is they idealize someone, and then they crush their expectations, and so they're down here. So they were like, this person's 100% perfect, and then they vacillate, the complete opposite. The person is 0% perfect. And so it's more to just be like, right when you meet someone, okay, like they're not as perfect as I think they're going to be, but they're not as bad as I think they're going to be either. And it's just practicing getting a little bit more in the middle. Introverted functions can be a little bit extreme, and so if you get a little bit of that extroversion, it will kind of balance that out. You can feel other people's energy. You can feel if they're healthy or not. I think if you really got honest with yourself, you could tell where this person is at the beginning of a relationship. Their fourth function is extroverted sensing. And since your first function is introverted intuition, that's who you feel like you are. You're like hardly ever, especially if you're young, probably going into extroverted sensing. You're probably like 98% of the time flipped up into introverted intuition, and then 2% of the time the light switch is flipped down and you're in extroverted sensing. So I think because an extroverted function and INFJs need help balancing some extroversion, I think you should bump up extroverted sensing maybe from 2%, try to get it to 10%. It's not going to be a strength by any means, but it can really help you in your life with some certain issues. When you couple extroverted sensing and extroverted feeling and they can kind of work together, that will really help you. Like sometimes I feel like introverted thinking is so strong and introverted intuition is so strong, weighing people down to introversion, that sometimes like extroverted feeling on its own can't get there. But if you get a little bit of extroverted sensing, then it's like together they can get there a little bit better. So I've noticed that people's fourth function is kind of where there can be some fear. I've heard of INFJs being like hypochondriacs. I'm an INJ, and I can sometimes be like a hypochondriac. Basically my whole life, my extroverted sensing was turned off, and I just had no idea. I was like, oh, I'll just fly on planes. I have no idea the risk. Or I would just kind of like do things and go through the motions. My senses were just turned off. I'd go to the dentist, not even feel anything, and it'd be fine. Then I started working on extroverted sensing a little bit, and all of a sudden I became aware of all the risks, and all of a sudden I became afraid to go to the dentist and afraid to fly and just afraid of all these sensory things. And so now I'm trying to get to the point, it was like turned off, then it was on, and I was like hyper aware of it. And now trying to like cool it down and get better about it. But I think INFJs probably could have a tendency to be hypochondriacs. If you don't have any extroverted sensing, you're probably never getting into your body. So that's not good. You gotta listen to your body. I mean, there are clearly reasons why you have to listen to your body. One thing about extroverted sensing, like if I was gonna contrast, introverted intuition is like in the mind, extroverted sensing is in the body. Introverted intuition is trying to conserve energy. Extroverted sensing is trying to expend and put out energy. Introverted intuition is kind of working slow over long time frames, like 50 years. And extroverted sensing is very in the moment. It's very quick reaction time in the present moment, very short timelines. And so if you get to a little bit of extroverted sensing with those quick timelines, that allows you to cut off relationships sooner. Like if you see the red flags, just cut it out before it's a codependent best friend that you've had for 8 years. You know, just do yourself the service of cutting them out in a harmonious way after a week so that there's not so much invested. It's just an acquaintance. So when I say cut it off, it's not really like cut it off. It's just like, it's an acquaintance and you guys can just go your merry way. For INJs in general, extroverted sensing can be very busy and like leave the house. And since INJs don't use that, we're just like never leaving the house, sitting on the couch all the time. It's very stagnant. It doesn't want to use any energy. So it just sits all the time. If you feel like you like to walk around or clean the house and stuff like that, I feel like that's more of an ISFJ thing to do. INFJs are just gonna be like sitting all the time. They never, ever, ever, ever want to expend energy, especially when they're younger. Like they would just love to sit all the time. It's a very sedentary lifestyle. Also, like I could see like INFJs just like not eating very much. So get your eating taken care of, move your body. I think that'll help your like long-term plans wanting to help people. I think extrovert sensing gives you a sense of reality. Like instead of idealizing people, extroverted feeling and extroverted sensing give you a groundedness. Like this is what this person is actually like. I will take my feelings into account. I will advocate for my own feelings. And I will get into extrovert sensing the reality, not the trend of where this person's potential could go, but in reality, this is where they are. So in a kind way, I'm going to break it off sooner rather than later. And I think extrovert sensing, extrovert sensing could get you into like parties and really enjoying your life. Extrovert sensing is a fun function that brings some more enjoyment. I think INJs can be really serious, and extrovert sensing gives you some fun. And you know, like I think that INFJs should just hang out with more people, bigger groups of people with more acquaintances. And like I said, you'll hang out with 99 people to get to the one that you like. But the odds are better if you get out of your house that you'll find people. They have a cool style. I mean, that's like in my opinion. All the INFJs I know wear like all black, and I randomly see them wearing red lipstick all the time, like a dark, like vampy lipstick, like dark, like a burgundy. I see that all the time, and I see them like they like dye their hair black. I don't know, there's something about INFJs where it's like all black, very minimal. Whereas this is another way I can contrast. Like I see ISFJ like women, I'll see them wearing like a light green dress with flowers in it, or a light blue. I see ISFJs wearing more color, and it's more like pastels oriented, you know. Whereas I see like INFJs having kind of like a gothic style. It's like very different. I think ISFJs would dress a little bit more normal. I don't know how to describe it. Where INFJs are gonna dress kind of like weird. I mean like weird in a bad way, but you're only like 1% of the population, and so you're gonna seem weird. I think INFJ's unique gift to the world is like they're like a sage. They're just like the wise person. They're willing to put aside, I don't want to say like facts, sort of, like especially if they're not in TI, they're willing to put aside like the facts and the logic, just getting kind of like their intuition. They're one of the most like woo-woo personalities because feelings and intuition together make a very like woo-woo, ethereal type person. And they get in touch with spirituality. They want spiritual growth. I know an INFJ is into hypnotism. I know an INFJ is into like burning sage in her house. I know an INFJ who says that she's like talked to like demons, and like I don't know, there's something just very like dark sort of about INFJs. So they're just willing to get into like another world sort of, and I think they take us there. I think a lot of people are not willing to put their head up in the clouds for a little bit, but INFJs are willing to sit with people of differing viewpoints and really hear people out. And you can have some deep conversations with INFJs. I think INFJs, maybe also INFPs, have really deep conversations. Like, in my opinion, some of the deepest conversations. Like, when you think of, like, emotional conversations or, like, what's going on in your life. I mean, you can get to some really deep stuff. It feels like just, like, a deep counseling session when you're talking to them. And I just feel for the INFJs because I think if like all their conversations are like that, I think that can be very draining for INFJs. Like it feels very like if I'm on the other end of it, that feels like rejuvenating to me. I'm like, wow, this person cares about me so much and we just got through all this deep stuff. But if the INFJ is kind of going from person to person doing that, I think that can be draining for them. But I think INFJs have a surprising fun side. They're surprisingly like really good with style if they're into extroverted sensing. I think INFJs can just like see beyond, and they make people think deeper about things. And if there's like two people that are having a hard time in a relationship, the INFJ can come in and it's like, have you noticed this pattern that you do? And have you noticed this pattern that you do? And it's like the people never even notice that they had these like issues that they do. And the INFJ can just like see through to it. I don't know, it's something really special. They just can communicate things in a way that anyone can hear it. Like they could communicate a very difficult truth in a way that everyone can hear it. I think that's one thing with INFJs. One time, there was a person, I think they were an INFJ. It was on this like reality, it was on the show Love Island, it was on this reality show, and they were like trying to break up with this person. It didn't even sound like a breakup because INFJs being so nice. They just don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. They were being so nice. So at the end of the conversation, the girl goes away and she's like, yep, I broke it off with him. And the guy comes back and he's like, yeah, it was good. We were just having a good chat. And he like had no idea there was even a breakup at all. So then later they come back and she's like, I broke up with you. And he's like, no, you didn't. And so I think sometimes they can even be like too nice on communication to the point where people are like, what are you doing? What are you saying? So yeah, I think if you're older, like if you're an older, I don't know what age is the cutoff. I'm like pretty young, so I don't know what age the cutoff is. But I would say I've noticed people like 40 and up seem to be able to balance all four of their functions without it being like a big issue. Of course, they're going to be unhealthy older people, but in general, I noticed that there are more healthy older people than younger people. And so I think if you're older, you can probably stand to use more of these functions. But if you're younger, you really got to get out of that third function for a little while. Because that's a nice little comfort zone. You got to stretch yourself and get out there. I do offer personality coaching if you're interested, like personality type verification, personality coaching, like a pick my brain session. And you can message me on Instagram, just DM me. My Instagram account is Alexis M. Kingsley. On Instagram, I do post more like list type things. Here was more of like a deep dive, but I post just kind of like fun list type things on Instagram. So if you want to follow me, go follow me there. I've been loving my Instagram conversations. Instagram DMs have been so fun. You can do like little voice memos, and I've been having such great conversations with people. I love just the culture of Instagram DMs way more than YouTube comments because people are willing to share personal things, you know? And so I've had some really great like personal conversations. Like if you feel like you just want someone to talk to, like in an NI sort of way, I'm totally down for it. That's been kind of an unsuspected consequence of me having a YouTube channel is that I've just found people that like to talk about the same sort of stuff that I like to talk about. And so I'm so grateful for that. I'm just seriously like incredibly grateful for the conversations that I've had. Yeah, if any of you have reached out on Instagram, I really enjoy it every time. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. I do have a Myers-Briggs 101 playlist, which I will link right here if you are interested in more of this type of content. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.